to you live from across America, the most dangerous people in the United States. It's the Trans Narrative Podcast.
Okay, well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Trans Narrative Podcast. I'm Caroline, and today we're sitting with Marla Alpert and our guest co-host Ocean Kane. And returning with us today as our co-hosts are Lucy Balzano and Athena Primarcus.
Good to be here.
So glad to have all of you here. Lucy, how are
I'm
you?
here as well. Sorry, I had some visitors at my doors. The Mormons.
So, Ocean Kane, it's so good to have you here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a 25-year-old trans girl. I've been on HRT for about 2 years. I do a lot of internet content related to like debating, especially on the TikTok platform. A lot of what I do is less philosophy and less like coming from a place of morality and more coming from a place of like taking information, like laws and publications that come out about like our bodies or like what people claim about us, and I spend a lot of time essentially challenging that where it needs to be like debunked or like given validity. So I try to base myself a lot on like actual peer-reviewed articles, and using sources like PubMed and Mayo Clinic.
That's incredible. I love that. I met you last week, actually, scrolling through TikTok. I found you on a live, and the way that you just assassinate these, or that's not the right word, these transphobes is, we're gonna use that word. Yeah, that, the way that
Targeted
you
Divorce
unaliving.
them from this mortal coil.
the way you dismantle transphobia is just it's like a job, and it's so amazing how you just combat that, and I applaud you for spending your time throughout the week engaging with such transphobia. I know that it can be so taxing and tiring, but thank you
Very
for
exhausting,
Mhm.
especially when it's like like our own community, because like not only do I spend a lot of time challenging people outside of the community, but a lot of people like trans medicalism as a philosophy, it's like super harmful to our community as a whole, so I spend a lot of time challenging that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think we
Hi.
should put a explanation on what the transmed is in the event that we have listeners who don't know the terribleness of transmed folk.
Yeah, so trans medicalism, or if somebody is a trans medicalist, the colloquial term for that is true scum, is people who believe that being trans is inherently and solely a medical condition. Somebody who believes that our brains and our identities like are purely aligned in one way, male, or in another way, female. And that if you are a trans person that does not have gender dysphoria, that you are therefore a too cute, which is the term that they use for anybody who uses like trans identities as more of like a like some kind of new trend, essentially. And then they spend a lot of time using medical science as a way to try to challenge non-binary identities.
I believe that's also where the idea of like trans trender came from, as if like, you know, somebody's gonna assume this is some sort of trend, or that losing, you know, family members, work relations is something that could be seen as trendy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so too cute is another. Too cute is one colloquial term. Another term is transgender. It's essentially the same thing. They come from a place where they pretend, they act like what it is to be trans, or a transgender specifically, like is like actually harmful to their bodies, and so they create this narrative for themselves that they're saving people from going through procedures that they will end up developing reverse dysphoria from, which is essentially where you change your body and it's not right for you, and so you develop dysphoria because now your body doesn't align with your actual gender identity. So they profess themselves to be some saviors of the too cutes.
Marla. Hi, Marla.
Hi.
How are
Hi.
you?
Okay. You?
I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. It's so good to finally meet you.
Same.
It's like I know you probably get this, but it's so neat to meet such a influential figure on TikTok who has such a dominance on the platform. And I think that you do amazing work. So let me just get that fangirl stuff out of the way first. So oh my
Thank
God.
you. I don't know how I got there at all.
It's our lives have been thrown into the spotlight and our activism just is it's just spotlight. And so I just applaud everything that you do. So it's so good to finally meet you. So okay, how are you?
I am okay. Um, as okay as one can be in the current state of trans affairs in the United States.
It's it's not a safe world out there for us. And
No.
I'm very grateful that we are privileged enough to be able to be in these spaces together and share our voices and amplify them out through the social media platforms. Thankfully, we still have that. And who knows if that's under going to be under attack. I'm certainly certain that it will. So
Mhm.
we need to set safeguards in place to ensure that our access to information is protected for sure.
100%.
So, okay. I would like to know a little bit about you, Marla. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So as a whole, or as a continued line of work, I've always been an actor. That's how I started on TikTok, talking about, well, I started on TikTok with videos of me off screen singing to my dog. Um, and then moved on to talking mostly about trans representation in media, especially theater. And then I don't know, the transphobes came along and I found myself swatting them off like flies, you know, um, with their very easily debunked um, rhetoric. And I don't know, it just kind of picked up from there. And it's grown and grown and grown. It seems like I can't even go back to talking about media and theater anymore. Those videos tank so very quickly. Um, but outside of TikTok, I am still a trying to work actor, which is very difficult as a trans woman, especially in musical theater. I do standardized patient work to help doctors better understand our community and better treat our community, as well as other communities and other groups of people. And yeah, that's pretty much my life.
Yes, I like your vibes. They're very, very chill and very just, I love it. I love it. Especially in today's climate, it's very hard to just a chill, vibe with our like lives being under threat, like at every moment.
I'm speaking calmly, but there's fury and anxiety just bubbling underneath.
I call that a duck situation. Have you ever seen when a duck swims? It looks like it's like bobbing on the top all gently, calmly, and underneath it's paddling furiously away. Like motherfuckers. Goddamn motherfuckers.
What
Well,
Yeah,
initially
it's a good
got
way
you
to
into
describe
like into like media?
into media, into like theater in general.
Yeah, the theater interest.
Um, whew, I mean, I didn't start theater until high school. I had gone into marching band, so I was already in like the art side of high school, and I had not even auditioned for the musical that year, but somebody dropped out last second. It was Bye Bye Birdie, and I ended up playing Harvey Johnson, which, if anyone knows Harvey Johnson's wonderful solo in Bye Bye Birdie, it requires cracking on cue because he's like um, the nerdy boy, awkward boy. And then I did theater all through high school. And I graduated high school as valedictorian and with straight A's. And I had wanted to go into some kind of art at that time, whether that be performing or visual art or anything. I used to draw. I don't really draw anymore. And everyone said, "Oh, you're going to waste your brain on that." So I went to Tufts University, just outside of Boston, for pre-veterinary medicine. And after the first year, I realized I was unhappy. I was unhappy with the school. I was unhappy that I was picking a profession that wasn't following my dreams and more just settling. And I dropped out. Also, I was afraid of blood. And I dropped out and went for 2 years, worked in theme park work at a Six Flags, learned a bunch of circus skills, met a bunch of friends who are still friends today. And then I went back to school for my bachelor's in theater, my bachelor's in fine arts and musical theater. And since then, I have done 2 national tours, a dozen or so regional theaters, off Broadway, concerts here in New York. Yeah, that's about it.
That's about it. Oh my God, it's not about it.
The Jane
That's-
of all trades. You're like, I did this. There's some medical involved, some circus involved.
You know, the second that I would never say that I was ever like a boisterous or loud person or even a confident person. I'm much more so after transitioning. But your sense of worth really, to begin with, in musical theater gets beaten out of you. And on top of it, to do the kind of work I'm doing and to have been right where I was in my profession, like right before the pandemic, everything was going right. I was going to play my first lead in a union production as the title role, and I had gigs set up to sing at with this concert series and also here in New York. And then the pandemic hit, and that's when I transitioned finally, because I realized that my profession was holding me back from doing what I wanted to do and be who I wanted to be, who I want to be. But after doing all that and then finding yourself at 35 retraining your entire vocal instrument, your entire instrument that you worked your entire life on, and having to go through the embarrassment of making weak sounds or poor sounds or cracking, trying to create something new, really, really, what's the best way to put this? Takes the piss out of you.
Yeah. I was 35 when I started HRT as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, whew.
Yeah, I started at 33, but yeah, I'm 35 now.
You get people who'll be like, "Oh, why are you talking like that? Like, are is that like your gay voice?" Like, no, that's my I'm gonna stab you voice. Thank you for asking.
I love vocal training. I think it's the neatest thing. I remember one of the first conversations that Lucy and I had actually last year in the show was about vocal training, and I learned a lot about like lifting your Adam's apple, and then about resonating, and like how you know uh people that are cisgender have their vocals and how they kind of like it's in that like men speak from the chest, or cis men like it's heavy in the testosterone, like and then it's up here with the lifting, but then like it's important to like not go too high, because then like you'll get that like sound like this, and we don't want
It'll
that.
sound like a
And
falsetto. Yeah. Well, the issue is that there's gender norms that are like still ongoing to this day, where you have to think like, oh, men speak from here and women speak from a higher register, and it's like, well, my sister is a cis woman who has a condition that there's extra testosterone in her body. She has shoulders as wide as mine. She has a beard. She's just cisgendered, and she's actually been misgendered going to the restroom and accosted as well, where people will be like, hey, this is a woman's restroom. And the voice training, sure, it does play a little bit into that, but sometimes your safety is kind of paramount. And having a passable voice, even though passable itself is somewhat problematic, because like a woman is a woman. If you decide you're a woman, you're a woman. But sometimes that danger is removed by using voice training.
Yeah.
I think that's really the biggest thing for is wanting to pass is more for safety. I mean, I'm sure dysphoria plays a lot of in with the role with that, but passing is really a safety tool for many
Yeah,
trans
and then I mean
people.
in theater it's like it's essentially like another thing because audiences do not want to hear me sing as a baritone. It's off-putting to them. So, you know, in order to not just for safety, not just for dysphoria, but for career-wise, I have to create something that an audience is at this point in time is more willing to accept. So I have, and it's been very difficult for me to train myself out of I was trained very classically, which is like low larynx, raised palate. And I've had to unlearn all that because to create that more, in quotes, feminine sound, you need that higher larynx. I am fortunate in that I have always had a very wide falsetto range up into the soprano areas. Now it's a matter of making it consistent, making it varied in color, making it strong on the bottom, and making it connected to my chest voice.
How has your voice training and your transition overall affected your ability to get roles and succeed in that theater area?
It's gone downhill. I mean, it's nice that if there's something looking for me, I'll be in for it. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I don't get taken seriously for cisgender roles. I do need to just start making my own videos when they won't see me and just sending them in just to try to prove something. Like it's one of those things where I have a good agent, but you also have to really be like, listen, this is a good idea. Listen, here's why. Listen, you really have to advocate for yourself. Since transitioning, since the end of the in quotes again, pandemic, when theater started opening again, I did one straight play a couple months ago. I had been cast in a musical, but the upsurge of I don't even remember what we were on at that point, Omicron or something, one of them knocked that one out. And then I've also done drunk musicals here in the city and a concert at 54 Below with a bunch of people, but I do not get seen for as much as I used to. It's not worth me going into open calls. It's a waste of time. They're looking to be as quick and economic as possible and just shove people into a box. They're looking for a type. Whoever does that type the best, into the box, do the show, make the money. And now the word about is that Wicked is set on casting a transgender Alphaba, which I think is a great role for a trans woman to play. I think especially a trans woman of color would be a fantastic choice. But at the same time, I'm like, so what are you willing to do here? Are you willing to lower keys or not? Because if you're not willing to lower keys and work with what a trans actor needs to be successful, you're not going to cast them because they're never going to be successful. And then especially in that case, you have to ask, I always have to ask them, like, So you're doing this. What, to what end? You know what I mean? It's wonderful that you're taking this step. I'd rather, there be new trans roles out there. But at the same time, how is this going to work out for that transgender actor, especially in a show like that that is so been open for so long, has so many people who are just like obsessed with it, know every key, every word, every line, expect a very particular performance. When a trans woman comes in there and stuff is lowered and a little different, how's that audience going to react?
What do you think the solution is to the issue of trans girls like getting into roles? What do you think like the best angle would be?
I think the best thing is to normalize changing keys. That's something we have to do first. And just write more transgender roles in general. Like, it's great if let's say there's a new production of something and they decide to cast a trans actor, and then from now on, for the rest of let's say Broadway, where you're replacing actors, that's where this really becomes an issue. Because when it's a singular production that always has the same cast, you can decide this will be a trans woman. Let's think about the keys. Let's think about what we have to do. But when it comes to something like Broadway, where things are set, and then it's like, now we're going to put a trans person in there, and now we have to change everything that's already been going on for maybe years, and the musicians now have to get paid to learn all this stuff in new keys. That's much harder, and I don't know how well it will work out. It worked out for Alexandra Billings in Wicked, but that's really then Angelica Ross also in Chicago worked out for. I haven't checked to see if they lowered keys for either of them, but I have to imagine they did.
You said earlier that you had like a really good agent. How's your agent like provided you support while you're looking for these roles and trying to get casted?
So my agent has been very good about getting me in the door. That's the first thing. I mean, that's the number one thing, is to get me seen. He has been very supportive when I've called him to be like, listen, this is not going to happen. This is absurd. For like, they're seeing me so that they saw a token trans person. There's like no possible way they would ever consider casting a trans woman in this role. Like, he's been very good about being like, I get that. And sometimes I've decided not to take those auditions, just because it would just, my performance and what I would give them would be bad, and that would give them a certain idea of me that I don't want them to have of me when something more appropriate comes along. Because there's been so many times they've asked me to sing for these traditionally cisgender roles, and I'll be like, can I change the key? And they'll be like, just sing it an octave down. Oh, in like the manliest range? That's not happening. Manliest in quotes again. Sometimes I'll just do it myself. I'll just be like, I'm just changing the key. I don't care what they say. But that has never worked out to my advantage. He's also been very good in understanding the plight of trans actors and marginalized actors in general. There was this whole big blow up a few months ago about an Asian non-binary actor named Sarah Porkalob, who had done this interview. They were in 1776, and they'd done this interview that was very, very candid, like more candid than any interview has ever been on Broadway, and very much pointing out the plight of marginalized actors in a performance space, in a rehearsal space. And a lot of people, especially a lot of white cisgender actors, got very, very mad. Sort of that, like, well, if they won't do their job, then I deserve it. Like, that sort of thing, which was so absurd. And my agent was right there with me the whole time, being like, this is like absurd. Like, he's the first one, even though he is white, cisgender, gay man, first person every time to be like, you to everyone else who's not quite as marginalized, to be like, you need to cut your bullshit.
You brought it, so bringing that up, so like, while I really hate the term ally personally,
Yeah.
there's just no real better term for it. Do you have any other allies that really kind of like helped you like manage yourself as you're like, because like obviously like theater cares through you, even if you're cis, but like but yeah, do you have like allies that actually like are supporting you through this?
In the theater realm,
Yes.
so I have a coach who I honestly have not talked to in a couple months, but he's very supportive. But then I don't know, it's been a lot of things that he said that has been like completely devastating to me, and honestly ridiculous. But outside of that, I very recently started working with a new vocal coach who has been giving me lessons pro bono, and very, very good lessons at that. So that person, definitely an ally. There's certain casting agents who have repeatedly called me in since transitioning, and cast me once, but at the same time, you have to also be like, you're also looking to meet a quota of seeing a certain number of people of a certain group. So that's kind of like benefit for me, benefit for them.
Going back to your one comment about there just needs to be more trans stories and roles made specifically for trans people. There is a sort of parallel that I've noticed between that and, for instance, as a Black person, Black roles. Like, whenever a character comes out, you have people complaining, "Oh, you blackwashed this character to be a Black person," and it's like, "Oh, don't worry, honey. Y'all have done that repeatedly throughout history for other races. It's okay." But have you considered, like, in the future, like, your plans of making those roles? Because I feel like it's a Jordan Peele thing where it's like, oh, we don't want Black main characters. So then, once he finally got the money, he was able to start making movies where he did just that. And you would see people get like very upset, like, "Oh, how come there's no white main character?" Like, "Oh, y'all told me to go make these stories, so I fucking did."
Yeah, I mean, I think making our own stuff is the way that shit's gonna happen. I don't. I've tried to write myself. I don't know that I'm that great of a writer. And for musical theater especially, I would need a partner. Then that's never really come up. It's also being an actor, auditioning, making enough money to live, and now also like I'm writing on top of it. So that, and then trying to make that get seen. So yeah, I don't know that I'm the person to do it. Maybe I am, and I just
Well,
don't know it.
I know,
Maybe you
like,
are, you just don't have the money yet.
in
Yeah.
theater spaces, making accommodations for people can be difficult because you do have a group of 30 people all trying to train for like one specific key, and switching that for everybody kind of
Yeah.
throws a monkey wrench into it. I can understand. I know music and have produced music myself a bit, but one thing that might be something to make it more approachable is the technologies that we have to use, like pitch shifting technologies, but then that takes a whole nother kind of skill to be able to sing in the wrong key so it can shift you up to the right key. But
Mm-hmm.
other resources, like just being able to use recording resources, can also help us to tell the story, even if it's not in the same venue as we might be used to seeing.
That's actually a really, really good point. I know there's a um, a writing team that I had done a workshop with. They're composed of, I believe, I'm sorry if I get this wrong. One of them is a cisgender lesbian, and the other is non-binary, and they, on top of the musicals that they've been writing, have also been doing radio plays. And I was like, oh, well, that's a way to get stuff seen in a different venue than we're used to.
Absolutely. So radio plays would be kind of a similar audio venue to this, but this is also kind of a safe and non-orchestrated, like in people or writing songs or performing to a venue. A lot of times we'll have to like try and keep things all in one pitch or one key. Having a Sondheim where you take one of the lead motives and putting it down a fifth or a fourth. No, sorry, that just breaks the whole thing.
I mean, I was such a brilliant accompanist, and he is so I don't know how he does it. There'll be pieces that we were working on that he's like, he's so good at making the keys, like if there's already a key change there, he doesn't necessarily do the same interval, but this has got to be so boring to non-music people, he won't make it the same interval change, but will still make it work just for that next section to be within the range of my voice. And that's so cool. I don't know how he does it. There's people out there talented enough to do it.
Absolutely. And well, a lot of it is just kind of the awareness and writing the roles that are flexible enough that maybe don't require the same kind of range. But Broadway is 100% performance, 100% out there. And just having transgender people as, like, say, 1 in 100 if we look at the old school representation, or 1 in 20 if we look, or 1 in 20 now if we look at the age group of 26 to 33, I think it was, or something like that. That now, or no, it's 18 to 26, 5% of people identify as non-binary or transgender. So those roles should be opening up, but there's got to be some pioneers in that. Do you see any other voices that you'd like to have boosted on that scene?
Yes. They're not, she's not rather trans, but she is queer, and she does write a lot of queer stuff. I did something recently with a writer named Maria Contreras. I hope that was right. I think that's right. Who wrote a number of wonderful things, was responsible for the concert, the queer holiday concert that I did at 54 Below. I know out there's other people who I've not personally met. I know the creators of Transparent are currently working on a Transparent musical that's set to go up soon. I had unfortunately been asked to sing for Ari / Allie, which is the character who, like, has everyone seen Transparent? Anyone? No one?
First couple seasons.
Okay. Allie, the youngest of the kids. Sorry, I'm ruining spoilers. The show's been out for a while. Allie, the younger of the kids, who is AFAB, eventually at the very end of the show starts identifying as non-binary. And they called me in for that, and I'm just like, here again, like, you just think you can call any trans person in for any trans role, and I'm like, this character is supposed to be AFAB. If this was a straight play, sure, yeah, I could do it. But you're supposed to believe them to be AFAB from the very beginning and then transition to non-binary. It's not gonna work for me in a singing, when singing is involved. They also, sorry, my partner just came in the room. Where is it? Hold on. My entire thought process just went.
It's all right.
Right at the window. I kind of wish they had. I know the character of Gittel is portrayed in the new musical as, like, that was a trans woman, a Jewish trans woman. Like, could you see me for that rather than this role that there's just not a chance that I was going to be seen for? There was another production of a Shakespeare play out in California that I had been asked this queer, I want to say it was 12th Night, I might be wrong. and they had asked me to read for this role, and I'm looking at the description of how they had queered it up, and I'm like, this is a trans mask role. Like, do you think you can just, like, any trans person is any trans person for this stuff?
I've noticed in like corporate environments that's exactly the case, because I get asked about policy for just all trans people all the fucking time. So yeah, I'm fairly certain the cis, they think that like, oh, we could just like, you know, fiddle around with it, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
the other thing you see is either that, or you see very small boxes. You see trans women generally only playing, like, I mean, it used to be just
Sex
playing
worker.
sex workers.
Yeah.
Now
The
you'll see,
victim,
like,
sex workers.
yep, maybe today we could play like an intern in an office, and
Yeah.
then for
Jessica Jones.
An unemployed child.
yeah,
Yeah.
then for like AFAB people, especially non-binary AFAB people, it's like, if you're AMAB and you're non-binary playing a role, it's like you kind of fall into that trans woman category where it's like you'll be a sex worker or a drug addict or something. And if you're AFAB, they treat non-binary characters like, quote unquote, like woman plus, or like just like, I don't want to say spicy woman, because TikTok has a certain like inclination for spicy, but like, you know what I mean?
mm.
We've all seen those portrayals. Like,
Yeah.
if you're trans fan, you're gonna be a villain. We've all seen Ace Ventura. I mean, I was a
Yeah.
child when I saw that movie and was like, still didn't make the connection until much later. You know, either that or we'll be on like Law and Order as somebody who was, you know, murdered. For that's why I really like. I've been watching a lot of Star Trek because, again, huge Trekkie, and to
Super
see
queer.
What's that?
Super queer.
Oh yeah, and then the thing that they did with Gray, love it.
So
It's very refreshing.
so since you brought up TikTok, I just wanted to like ask you a little bit about maybe moving a little bit away from theater and more towards like, and more to, because like you were talking about how there's a lot of like, they basically will blend all trans people together. They'll force us in and like really erase the different lives that trans people can truly live. So I'm wondering, like, what language do you think is most effective for like making sure that we amplify the different trans voices, and what language do you think is used more to erase us and kind of like put us all into a box?
Language in what way?
Language as in what narratives are commonly used. What is the best way that we can like format our voices to advocate for ourselves, and what ways do we see that we're constantly kind of like put away? What language is used against us? What constant narratives are used against us?
Are we still in the theater realm, or are we in the real world
More
now?
towards TikTok.
The TikTok.
Okay.
More towards TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, of course, trans men are completely fucking erased. We all know that.
Yeah.
On TikTok, completely, you know, and then used as a tool against trans women to be like, oh, the trans men never say shit. I was like, one, they do, you just don't hear them. Two, you don't think about them because you think of them as women. Three, of course we're fucking loud. You call us predators every other fucking day. So I think trans men are very much erased in that way. And I'm kind of hoping that this new talking point about that is going to create more space for trans men to be loud. I'm seeing a lot of trans men who are seeing that and are like, fuck no, we're not doing that. And very much stepping up to bat. Women, of course, on TikTok are seen as invaders, taking up a woman's space, being too loud, mansplaining, which I mean, the way that transphobes use mansplaining against any trans woman who says anything is so wild to me because, I mean, first of all, regardless of what you think of my gender, mansplaining requires that I know less on the subject. We're talking about trans issues. Like, in what world do you think you know
I'm a
more than
fucking expert.
when it comes to trans issues? And the other thing, it feels very much the same way they'll use that to shut us up, in the same way that cisgender men will tell any loud or outspoken cisgender woman that she sounds naggy. It's just a repetition of the same tactics. It's really, really disappointing.
There's a lot of those tactics that are repetitive and simple, and people just come in to try and punch with them. But there's other words that we aren't really allowed to say on those platforms or on other platforms like Facebook or YouTube, things like that, that other people seem to get away with without a problem. And one of the words that I think is, or one of the phrases that I think is most impactful to our situation and important to say is the words transgenocide together. And watching Zoe Zephyr in front of Montana Senate in testimony being shut down again and again and again as she tried to bring up this topic, stick to the bill, stick to the bill, stick to the bill. We can't talk about the larger trend. I thought we'd maybe have some space to just talk about that word, to kind of breathe on it, maybe meditate, because it's a heavy, heavy word. You know, and it's been something that's affected multiple other minorities, so being careful and respectful of that term as well is important to us.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a word that I use a lot and something I refer to a lot. Of course, my dear sister Lucy was kind of the first person to bring it to TikTok in such a loud way. And I remember it was about the same time, shortly before that, I think it was when Texas announced that they were going to start taking trans kids away from parents, and just like at the start of when this got really bad, I remember coming on to sort of tell my side of it as a Jewish trans woman, and the parallels that I had already seen back then, and they've only grown so goddamn much. And I remember talking to Lucy back then and she was like, can I make this comparison? And I was like, yeah, we should be making this comparison. And she was the first person to say transgenocide on that app, as far as I know, and the first person to make it her whole thing. And now what do you see? You see all of these usernames that say stop transgenocide, and that's her. But I think it's really important, and I think it's really hard because people who are not experiencing anything that could even be remotely compared to that have used that term and watered it down and made it so questionable when anyone uses it. I mean, you've had evangelicals for 50 years being like, they're coming for us, they're coming for us. Who's coming for you? You're in all seats of power. Like, what?
Yeah. It's to be considered a Republican in this day and age, just to be considered somebody of Jewish descent back in Nazi Germany. No, it's not.
And then it got so much worse when
Not
it
even
came
close.
to vaccines and mask mandates, where they're I mean, I saw something recently. Sorry, my dog is barking. I'm gonna let her in so that she stops barking at the door. You want to come in, baby? Come on. So you had the mask mandates and you had the vaccine mandates, and they of course were doing it then. And I remember now she wants water. This is like the worst timing. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Right in the middle of transgenocide, really, Olive? Really?
It also gives me time to play with my fidget spinner. My fidget spinner is a knife.
I got a knife recently. I have it now tucked in my purse because that's the world we live in. But that's I feel like that's statement.
That's why I have a taser, a knife, a stun gun, pepper spray, a boken. I just don't have my guns anymore.
I have a hostage and rescue team knife. It's an HRT knife. It's branded HRT. So I defend myself with HRT.
That's nice. Okay, where was I? Hopefully you can't hear her drinking water in the background.
That's okay.
Yeah,
We have
so
a
you
good
had
editor.
the anti-vaxxers and you had the anti-maskers saying that, oh, it's just like the Holocaust. And you literally, just a few weeks ago, I saw a bunch of them wearing Stars of David. And I was like, this cannot be fucking real. And then I remember about maybe 8-9 months ago when there was already all these laws coming forward and we were already saying what this is turning into. I remember this politician, and I think it was in Australia, who who compared allowing trans women to compete in women's sports to Germans watching the train cars go by.
I guess
Absolutely
we'll
ridiculous.
Stretch of the imagination.
Meanwhile, we're actually dying. It's so hard for me to remember that I can say the word dying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is a
one
safe
of us was
space.
just murdered recently, who was a TikToker,
Yeah.
Rihanna Gay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're dying. We are dying at our own hands because they are making our lives a fucking misery. And these people have the nerve to compare anything in their mundane existence to genocide while this is going on, or for TERFs to be like, you're erasing womanhood. There's been 300 laws written against me, some of them that would keep trans people out of public, and you're talking about erasing because of an inclusive term for feeding a baby? Like, what world? What world?
Their own little weird world.
So we're using like a lot of very strong language in this conversation. Genocide, suicide, dying by our own hands, us being killed. I also need to learn that I can say the word killed here instead of unalive. But like realistically, we're kind of like that is exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at the suicide rates among trans youth, especially, like skyrocketing. We're and they're the ones that are most heavily legislated against. And so like I just have to ask, what is your perspective on the best solution as we look towards not only these laws that continue to come out at increasing rates, but also a presidential nominee that has just fully said in an interview that if elected, he would create an executive order to ban gender affirming care for all ages. Where do we move from here?
That's the toughest question. And I think, to me, first of all, we can't choose one route, in my opinion. I think on a personal level, you should be ready to fight. On a personal level, you should have whatever you need to get to defend yourself. You should also have, if you can, and I know this always gets pushback because obviously it's harder for some people, if you can have an escape plan, have a fucking escape plan. But in addition to that, we need to have all of those things, but we also need to be it's so hard to say because I've really begun to question, does marching do anything at this point? I don't know that it does.
Take it from a Black person. You can march all you want. You can be peaceful in your protests, just like Martin Luther was. You're still going to get shot. You got to be violent in the streets. Stonewall was a riot. Civil rights. We rioted to get the civil rights. We rioted to get our weekends, our worker rights, making sure children aren't in the workplace anymore. All required riots. Now, not everybody's capable of doing it. I'm really good at doing it, but that doesn't mean that you're required to know how to riot.
In
And
theory,
I
we
think
have to be careful saying it on this platform. We don't want to, I'm concerned with that.
Yes, theory.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think what people who are, whether correctly or incorrectly, being labeled as Antifa are doing and showing up to counter protest with the same energy and the same arsenal as is very. I think we need more of it in general. Sorry, just being
I
my partner
agree.
went to do the laundry.
Needy puppy.
I don't want there to be violence, but when you have men with masks showing up with fucking dozens and dozens of guns, like, you'd be stupid to just be like, we're just gonna go about our day and have no protection. The cops don't protect us; they protect them. You know,
Right.
I'm what I on a non-trans level, you know, I'm looking at this shit that went on outside of the first preview of Parade the other night here in New York on Broadway. Those people certainly didn't get a permit to be out there with signs, these anti-Semitic signs, and to say these anti-Semitic things. So why the fuck were the cops not getting rid of them? I mean, I have protested outside of a Broadway theater. The cops knew about it beforehand. We had our own space. Not that I think that that's the most productive way of doing things, but the point is, you know, these were just half a dozen disgusting, hateful anti-Semitic randos who showed up, and they get protected. If you'll remember, 4 or 5 months ago, maybe it's even less than that, in Central Park, there was a bunch of TERFs who showed up to rally. I think it was Central Park. It was a park. And there were a bunch of counter protesters, way more than them, who were all on the sidewalk, but the cops were in the street, and the cops were like, you're blocking traffic. There were no counter protesters in the street. And then the cops cleared the trans positive counter protesters. So let the TERFs be. So obviously the cops are not on our side. I have a hard time imagining the federal government is on our side, because how are there these far-right groups that are clearly a danger to democracy? We saw that January 6th, and nothing's being done about them until they've committed a crime already.
Years later.
Yeah. We're not getting them in the planning stages as much as we should be. I know some people have been caught, you know, like the attempt to abduct, what's her name? The governor, Gretchen.
Oh yeah, like Michigan, was it?
Yeah.
Yep, Gretchen Whitmer.
Like, obviously they were caught, and there's been other like attempts on the power grid that have been caught before they've been able to do anything. But when you have these militias training against the US government in fucking fields, and we had them on fucking video, like, why is nothing being done?
Well, we know why.
Something Second Amendment. I can't remember.
Mhm.
Lost
White
in a lot of
cis men
white
were
noise.
angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, white noise, as many Black people have referred to it, white noise.
Yeah, but then, like, of course, like, you know, it was on the other hand, when you had the Black Panthers show up, you know,
Oh yeah,
decades ago with guns, it's like, now the government's got to do something about this. We can't have this happening.
when Reagan was the governor of California, being like, I'm all about that Second Amendment. You can carry your guns. Open carry's legal. Black Panthers were like, oh, okay, we're gonna open carry and watch police as they pull over our black brothers, sisters, and non-binary crew. Next thing you know, yo, black folk with guns. No, we can't be having that. We got to
Mhm.
rein it in, and that's exactly how it went.
Yeah, which is why, even as trans people, it's dangerous to openly carry like
Oh
that,
yeah,
which is it's yeah, it feels like we're at a disadvantage every single way because we're such a small part of the population. That's why they're able to get away with what they're getting away with. If we were a larger percentage of the population, they wouldn't. But we have such a small percentage of the population. We rely on allies, and allies are not reliable.
reliable. We
I
we've learned that with the wizard game. We've learned that with the
Mhm.
wizard game.
I think
Oh
there's
please, don't play this wizard game because people like me get murdered. But wizard game, my nostalgia.
I think there's some hope to be had though for the future, looking at like the statistics about like the younger generations and how they're being more accepting just of the concept by itself when it was a hush hush thing, or it was criminalized, or it was deemed a mental illness, where it's now just a part of the human condition and recognizing it as such and not as a criminal offense or as a mental condition is going to be the only thing that's really needed for people to understand that they have the autonomy to do with their bodies as they want to. They have that right. That should be all that we really need to have the long-term effects, but there's still going to be lots of other barriers to communication and things like that. The more we can talk openly about this and the more that we are tied into our families and our stories without having to be uprooted and move somewhere else,
Yeah,
the more the roles for art are going to open up for us, the more that there will
Mhm.
be voices that can be heard, because a lot of our history is just the history of that attempt at genocidal movements again and again and again, and it's never going to work because it's a part of the human condition. You cannot
Yeah,
destroy it.
but it's so I don't know. They can keep trying and they can try
They
to send us
will.
back into the dark again, and they will. Um, the question is all we have to do is hold out until this generation is no longer with us,
I
that holds these values.
I mean, they said us millennials said the same thing with about the boomers, and we saw how the millennials have been turning out. So I hope you're right. It's just
Mhm.
after seeing how my own generation has acted, it's like, nah,
We can't
I
put the
see it.
hope, yeah, we can't put the
Yeah,
hope out on anyone else. That's our responsibility, as we are part of that culture, to be an impactful narrative, not only to, well, I'm middle-aged, I'm 41 now, so I want to speak to my parents and my children about that, to translate the world of my children to my parents, and to make a space in the minds of my parents for the kind of world that my children will be living in, that is accepting of things that they find abhorrent in their worldview. So having that sort of middle generation speak up, I think, is really going to be the end of it. The transition of power hasn't been the same this generation. It hasn't been in previous generations. Boomers have lived forever and held on to
unfortunately.
all of their power without being taxed for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we get a lot of the conservative trends becoming more conservative and less attached to reality, more
Yeah.
siloed. So we have people living in their own realities on Washington, D.C., as well as out in the middle of nowhere in the United States, that seem to be reflective of each other's reality, but not anybody in between.
Yeah. Um, it's also I think we have to it's so hard to maintain the narrative, just especially with liberals and leftists in general. I feel or have the largest voice in the narrative, because even though we outnumber people on the right, if, for example, I saw a video from a detransitioner this morning who was like, I'm detransitioning. I love trans people. This has nothing to do with trans people. They should get all the care they need. This wasn't right for me, but I would never have found myself if I didn't do this. And I completely support trans youth and trans adults and trans care and all of that. And I was like, of course, this only has 1,000 likes. But if this, because we see something like that, and we're like, that's nice, cool. Maybe we show it to another person, press like, swipe away. But a conservative sees something of the opposite, someone being like, oh, I never should have transitioned. This is so terrible. How could they do this to me? And they will do everything to make sure every person on this planet sees it.
Yeah, it's like 0.3% of transition surgeries between 2016 and 2020 were dissatisfied with the surgical procedures. So they get the one person and they tell that story 300 times as much to make up the difference.
Yeah. I always have to laugh when people are like, you see all these people detransitioning now. And I'm like, there's this thing called the world would be such a better place if confirmation bias were taught in school. There's this thing called confirmation bias, and there's this thing called statistics, and you're just wrong.
Well, then when you break down the statistics for them, they don't really give a damn.
Okay.
Like, when you look at the statistics as to why most people who detransition did so, they end up a bigger percentage end up retransitioning, and the reason that they detransitioned was because of lack of support, lack of finances, lack of acceptance. And then when they get into a better place where they're more stable financially, emotionally, and so forth, they re-begin their transition. A very, very small percentage of the people who detransition stay detransitioned. Some people, they just got to the goal that they wanted. There's a person on, I forget their name, they're on YouTube. They just wanted a more masculine sounding voice. They wanted that, so they did tea for a bit. They stopped taking tea, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm it's not that I'm detransitioned or whatever, and it's not that I'm, going the other way. I just wanted a deeper voice. Like, I'm keeping this voice. It's not going back. I'm happy."
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about how you show people the statistics, and once you actually really break down the data, especially with detransitioners or anything else, that has to do with how they will cherry pick points, they being anybody that has problems with our bodies. Do you often get people that reach out to you that tell you that you have actually altered their perspective?
I would say it's, God. I would say people that I directly respond to, it's maybe 1 in 100. And even then, they're kind of like desperate to hold on to the bias in whatever way they can. Even they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, and then like are right back to their bullshit immediately, as if like when you realize that you didn't even know the bare basics of what you were talking about, and you had the ability to be like, oh shit, I didn't know what I was talking about. Shouldn't from then on everything in the conversation you take with you be like, maybe this person does know more than me, rather than trying to re-inject your bias into it. I recently, last month, I had like 3 or 4 people who I had direct conversations with who walked away from those conversations being like, I get it, you're right, yep, I understand now. And then within days we're right, and I made mutuals with them, and within days we're right back to their bullshit and I had to block them.
I'd like to point out, though, more power to you for being able to talk to these people. You and Ocean, I know you both have like debated transphobes, enlightened individuals, and you're most likely doing it because you recognize this person might not hear me, but somebody out there
Yes.
can come across this, listen, and be like, holy shit, thank you. To me, I just block them out right these days. I'm just so tired of it. I'm just like, all right,
there's certain things that I block out. Like I'm not arguing unless I see like a point that's worth creating a video about. I'm not sitting here arguing with another turf about the word fucking cisgender. It's just not fucking happening.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and have another
slur.
And I'm not gonna sit here and deal with anyone generally about sports anymore. I'm just not fucking doing it. There's enough fucking information out there.
Well, that yeah, as somebody who has several degrees in science, they don't care about the science. They really don't.
Yeah. So there's certain people that I've completely blocked out. But yeah, I would say most things that I respond to, it's not for the person I'm responding to. It's for people on the fence, people who are disinterested before they see that. And it's for allies and other trans people to have language to use themselves, which I love. I love when I go into a comment section and I see, or a video, and I see something that came straight from my mouth being used. It's the fucking best. Like to go into a like either it's something actually like a good point, like you know, when you're crying about the word about things like breastfeeding or birthing person, you're just doing the same shit as people who cry that you can't say the word Merry Christmas anymore. I'll see that one, or on the more absurd fucking with them side, I'll see people who will be like, someone will say you're appropriating gender, and I'll see someone who'll be like, no, I'm half woman on my mother's side. And I'm like,
I love that. I'm half woman
Funny.
on my side. Please.
When
I will
so
addressing,
sometimes you have to match absurdity with absurdity.
Mm.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
So
when
did
they
you say
kind
that
of,
you like that you do a lot of this and you reach out to people, and that you do see a lot of allies, cisgender allies, a lot of trans people that you do actually reach and do actually hear you out? Have you been able to like build a supportive community around yourself, people that you commonly know and recognize that will be there through you during like these kind of online tribulations?
I have a few who are definitely people who I turn to in certain situations, especially a certain number of trans men who, you know, like every time that I'm done with someone being like trans men never start shit. I'm just like, can anyone please take this? Like, I've taken many things you've asked me to take before. Can someone please take this? And then, you know, I have a couple of people who I talk to regularly, Lucy and Liv, and
Will you
some
talk to
other
me?
my Lucy.
Oh,
Lu-
I'm not your
sorry,
Lucy.
my Lucy. No, Lucy thinks aloud. Sorry.
I think out loud as well.
I'm so
It's
sorry.
100%
And Olivia and some other people, but I don't necessarily feel like I have the best support network. That's probably my own fault. I have a tendency to be like, I can take it. I can, yeah, I don't need to ask for that. You know, that's something that you get taught growing up as a boy, not to ask for help. Is I've gotten better, but it's still something I'm bad at.
so when you started your TikTok account, did you have in mind that you would become such a prevalent figure in the activism that we're seeing?
I literally started by singing to my dog off screen. Oh, I said dog.
That was mine. I apologize.
Everybody
then-
loves it. It's okay.
And then when I finally came out and started like being on the app as a trans person, I think one of my first big videos was talking about like not wanting to go to my family's for the high holidays, because I was trans and I knew my mother was not going to get it right. That was one of my first videos that did well. Oh my god, all my first videos that did well were like me being like so that did well. And then I remember watching one of my biggest early success was once I got live access, I decided to watch the Tony Awards live, and it was the year that Jagged Little Pill was up. And if you don't know, Jagged Little Pill had a trans character who they kind of erased and appropriated and cast with a cis person, and then that person won the fucking Tony. And I was like, you know, crying on my fucking live that this could fucking happen. Like there was no space for us. And then I did a video right after that, how I felt about it, and that blew up. And then I did a video explaining the Tony situation, and that blew up. And that's kind of where my TikTok account started. If it was activism, it was only within the realm of media and theater.
Yeah, there's a
think
lot
the
of expertise that you have that you can bring to where you are in life, but a lot of what you have to do on TikTok is just establishing the really basic stuff. These are the terms of the argument that we're having, or this is the terms of how you can respectfully approach someone. That must be really frustrating, but I think you're in a good position to amplify that right now. I see a lot of your videos and a lot of the feedback and a lot of those echoes, like you say. That's the best part about it, is how it can echo and how your words can influence and impact other people and improve their ability to make a space for themselves.
Yeah. I finally gotten to that point in my TikTok career where I'm getting stitched multiple times a day by some trans obsessed person who makes like 30 videos a day, like just like of nonsense, just like hating on trans people and saying absolutely nothing new. And all of them have like 2 likes. And I'm like, oh, your mom and your dad, great, fantastic. So I
Our
finally reached that
voices,
point, which is exhausting.
our voices are getting heard. I have seen a lot of my trans friends be shown on those negative, hateful groups, and they use videos of our TikToks, and they stitch them, and they laugh at the experiences that we go through, and
And I
it's
think I've only been on Libs of TikTok once, and it was in a video where I was not educating, not really, not in a in any way that had any real substance or statistics or facts. And I think what I've learned is they often stay away from me because I often, if there's anything I'm going to say that could come into question, I'll throw a stat up, I'll throw a fact up, like, so that, because that's not information they want their people to see. And I think that is what has helped me escape a lot of like these hate groups. I know I was on Kiwi Farms briefly mentioned, but
That's the
yeah. But I mean, I think like in a whole like I think someone made a video that was one of those compilations that I was in, and like in 50 pages of Kiwi Farms, I think I was mentioned 3 times in it.
oh
So that's like, but that's nothing. That's 500 comments, and someone was like, "Oh, what about this one?"
They try and just target people who are alone and possibly in mentally unstable conditions. So like having a support network is the best defense against those kinds of attacks and things like that. So if you ever have any need for friends at the very least, then hopefully we can be considered part of your support network, because nobody wants to be at the end of those kinds of people who can try and swat you or try and disrupt your personal life in their own way.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had wondered, it's almost a shame that I didn't get to see, maybe it would have brightened my day, but my account got banned for like 5 minutes, like a month ago. Maybe it was even less than a month ago. And in that time, I went to my alt and made a video, like stitching all the big creators who, I generally interact with. And, I was like, oh, surely the rally cry will come, right? I hope. But then my account was reinstated. I deleted the video, so I never got to see, if people were going to come to my aid or not.
What is Libs of TikTok? I am not on TikTok.
Lucky.
Of course, my For You page is literally thirst traps, makeup tips, thirst traps of every variety, makeup tips, and cosplays. So I have no clue what Libs of TikTok is.
Libs of TikTok is, in my opinion, it's stochastic terrorism. It is this huge Twitter account that takes very specific videos of trans people. Sometimes they're not even real, or they've been edited, or they've try to create a narrative around them, you know, and just post them with these very leading captions and basically send hate to that person, or dox them, or they're the reason that all of those, especially Boston Children's Hospital, was getting bomb threats and death threats, as well as a number of, I mean, they're the ones sending these gunmen to drag shows. They're being like, here's this drag show,
Here's
wink
the
wink.
time, here's the place. You know what to do is
Yeah.
what they put out. Yeah.
And the worst part about it is, as a Jewish person who grew up in an Orthodox Jewish town, the fact that the person running it is Orthodox Jewish, I'm like, there's so many fucking things I want to say that I cannot say.
So earlier you mentioned how your account was banned. And as somebody who also has to deal with the instability that is TikTok because they don't want their bottom line to be harmed, that's like a really scary position to be put in, especially when you have such a powerful voice on the platform. Have you considered moving to a different platform just to kind of like make sure you have like some kind of redundancy?
I think now that I'm starting to get a little better at editing myself, I've been considering it. I'm very bad about putting myself on Instagram, nor do I really get how Instagram works. I don't really get how people, I don't scroll on Instagram, so I don't really get how people find shit on Instagram. Twitter, of course, fuck that. So yeah, I really been considering moving over to YouTube. I just don't know what that would look like. I feel like things would have to be longer form. Not that I couldn't very easily do that, but it would also require higher production values than TikTok calls for.
Generally, their algorithm cares more for like longer content, and putting out a bunch of like stats and figures. This all came about because of the I don't have another word for it other than there was this phase for YouTube where it was like dude bro atheist versus dude bro Christian folk, and that's where the fallout kind of led to, which then had the anti SJW mentality afterwards, or it was like you spot a bunch of statistics, have it long format, typically does pretty well.
I honestly, like, my YouTube experience, I feel like YouTube has never been a place. When it first came out, I was like, yeah, YouTube. You know, when everyone was like crowding around a computer at school, being like, what the fuck is this new thing with all these, you know, you would see like, oh, what was the name of the group that did all those video games things? Was it Smosh? Was that something like that?
Oh, Smosh, yeah.
Yeah, like that was, you know, my YouTube experience. And then for years, YouTube was just like, if there was a song from a musical that I needed to hear or see like a production of or see a performance of, I go to YouTube for it. But nothing beyond that. I didn't really go looking for anything like that. Early on in my transition, I know a lot of people don't like her, but that's not my opinion. ContraPoints really helped me a lot. But then I have not.
Has she done something?
I don't understand the ContraPoints hate. I don't.
What happened? Did she do?
ContraPoints has had some trouble in the past. Sometimes it's one of those things where often she's taken out of context. There's some belief about some anti non-binary identities, while she's also like both. Well, she's made a whole video at one point talking about every single like issue that she's gone through. She apologized for the certain things that she doesn't believe anymore, or that she's developed an understanding, while also like standing firm on certain beliefs. So some consider her to be problematic, and some don't. She's a pretty like contentious person among the trans community.
Yeah. I mean, I saw people shitting on her for meeting with Hillary Clinton, and I was like, yeah, I'm like not the biggest Hillary Clinton fan either. I'm not a fan of, you know, centrist Democrats, but like, this is a trans person on a major platform with a major political figure. How could you not want that?
there's so many purity tests that we try to put up for each other that just somewhat ruin, the trans harmony experience to some degree. I feel like we should all just have like an ability to like set aside and say, I don't have to like unfriend you just for having a hot take that you want to play Harry Potter or
Yeah.
or something like that. But
Oh, I
it's still a part of the respect game that we play. Um, but you have to balance, like you said, on some people that you have the same conversations over and over again, and they're just not making any effort for it. Most people I don't feel are like that. There might be some inattention or attention deficit, but most people will listen to you if you do ask for it, uh, for at least some consideration. But there are always going to be exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
So does this just mean that, like, if I ever become rich and famous, I'm going to be disowned for meeting Joe Biden?
Yeah,
Likely.
Yeah.
Oh, bet.
we're
I
already
mean-
disowning you now for considering it.
Wait,
Considering
No,
it
I-
you already,
I-
hold on, you already met Joe Biden.
Yeah, I shook his hand and everything.
I know.
Terrible.
Don't let
mean-
people see those pictures. Because
Yeah.
it's
To-
because it does, just because you meet with someone, I'm a leftist. I'm a fucking leftist. I'm not a liberal, or I mean, I vote Democrat, but I don't consider myself a Democrat while I'm
Same.
registered as a Democrat. I'm a
I'm
Hard
leftist.
left. So far
And I'm-
left, you guns back.
Yeah. But like, I'm not going, and I understand that, especially for something like someone like ContraPoints, who is white and passing and well off, like people be like, oh, she's just one of these middle class white trans women, and she's not far enough left enough. And I'm just like, come on, like, I understand not wanting to bolster centrists, but like, they're not our enemies per se.
That's one good thing the right has about it, is they know how to band together to like
Mhm.
shit on us, because they don't give a fuck. They just worship hate. So they're like, oh, what's that? You hate just the blacks and you hate just the gays? We can come together and hate them both.
Yeah.
You think that because we're talking about a lot of like almost like I'd say it, in my opinion, almost unfair criticism that is levied towards trans people. Like, the ContraPoints is not the only person that met Hillary Clinton. Plenty of celebrities put their name behind Hillary Clinton, that we still enjoy their movies. Do you think that trans people face like a level of criticism that is just not like equal to like our cisgender counterparts?
I think it's, but I think, okay, I think when it comes to someone like ContraPoints, that's criticism from our own community, because I think we are very leftist, and for the most part. So I think that's criticism from our own community. So I don't think that's necessarily like a double standard, when it's coming from our own community. I think that's just purity test in general. Definitely from outside of the community, there's that sort of double standard. I made a video today where the first version of it I was like, someone could, if a cis woman did this, there would not be a word about it. But I, as a trans person, am going to go back and edit out these like couple words.
Did you use a robotic voice for the swap out? Because that would be awesome.
No. It was just it was narration, so I could easily remove it.
So earlier you mentioned how your TikTok kind of like initially blew up when you talked more about like the woe is me aspect to like being trans. Do you think that like the pain of trans people, or even like people's general understanding of trans identities and trans bodies, is purely through that lens of like misery and unhappiness?
I think to some extent it is, but I do not know that that's why those videos did well for me. I think any crying video on TikTok does well. I think people are just attracted to controversy and sadness. I don't know why. I don't know if they're like, oh, well, at least that's not me. I don't know if that's like actual empathy kicking in. I don't know what it is. I don't necessarily think that attraction there was about the trans experience is so miserable. I don't think that's what that was in that case.
How much of the so for people who see our experiences, how much do you think that cis people actually understand that there is an inherent joy to being trans and that is not all misery and pain?
I couldn't give you numbers on what percentage of them think that way, but I do see, and this is what I'm loving that I'm seeing now, especially with all these TERFs, is the cisgender women who have never felt confident in themselves because of those TERFs who were the mean girls, because they were infertile or they were intersex or they were fat or they were a person of color or whatever it was that made them not feel like they could fully be a woman because of this sort of hazing culture. The fact that we are now sort of creating a lot of allyship with them, at least I am on my page, and what I'm seeing a lot of them say is like, trans women really for the first time help me understand my femininity and my womanhood and feel confident and comfortable in my womanhood. And I think in that way, our joy is very effective.
We've had a lot of good conversations. We kind of want to wrap things up with some big questions. We want to make sure we haven't left anything untouched. Is there anything you feel like you would have liked to have been asked over the conversation?
No, I don't think so. No one asked my favorite color or my favorite food, but that's fine.
What
You know what?
color?
I'm
What color is your favorite
Oh,
food?
or what food is your
chartreuse.
favorite color?
Chartreuse is my favorite color.
There we go. There we go. Getting there.
A favorite food. I know this is I love raw oysters. I could just have raw oysters and a beer or wine. What am I getting this look for?
Uh-oh.
Raw
What?
oysters and a beer or a glass of wine is like the greatest thing in the world to me.
Have somebody over you just being like, hold on, I'm getting ready.
No, like that's not,
But-
obviously I don't have raw oysters in my fucking house. I
No,
get
I'm
them.
just saying, you just be like, hold on, here's some snot for you. We'll put it in like a little porcelain like plate, and here's some wine. I don't know. I've never tried oysters after getting my taste back. However, I've seen it and been brought to restaurants with it, and the person got like really sick afterwards. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Well, Lucy, do you want to go ahead and bring up your big questions for Marla?
Certainly.
Thank you.
All right. Are we gonna be doing like intros and outros afterwards? Because I don't think we did intros for Marla.
We haven't. No.
No, we
Yeah.
didn't. We just went right into it.
Yeah, we did. Though.
Yeah, we go right into it. Some of us like foreplay, Caroline.
Well, I'll do that in a little bit.
All right. So for my questions, I like to just pull them up out of like the same area. They're kind of like very generic, very bland, easy to answer. You know, stuff like what's the square root of the hypotenuse of an isosceles triangle with a base of 1. However, obviously your end goal, like would you say your end goal for what you're trying to do, how you would like to see the world change? Would you say that's more like to be more trans representation in media or a more accepting environment for trans people in general, if not both? Or am I just mischaracterizing what you'd like to see?
It's both. It's both. It's so hard when you're like, my original feeling was, okay, I'm going to create space for us in media and open doors and hold doors open. And it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I thought coming back into the profession after transition, I would be at the same place I was before transition, and that's just not the fucking case. So yeah, in that way, like I'd always said to myself, I felt like more representation would be huge for us. But at the same time, I don't know, because you watch all these people, the second there's a trans person on screen, they're like, everything has a trans person in it. No, it doesn't. Again, we have statistics, and that's not the goddamn case. We are underrepresented in media. So that's a double-edged sword. But of course, like, if the world was kinder to us, we would have more places in media. I don't know which comes first, or if it happens all at the same time.
Hopefully get it all at once. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say would be like the obstacle that you've seen the most outside of just the lack of roles? As somebody who's trying to be in, or who is in theater, not trying, you're obviously succeeding, because let's face it, this isn't just an uphill like climb. This is an uphill climb against the fucking, I don't know, rock slide, with every little pebble being some sort of turfy shitty headness. That's a word. I'm patenting it / copywriting.
I mean, the obstacle is convincing producers that it's worth having a trans person for this. And the other obstacle is creating something that an audience is comfortable with. Because the biggest thing, when it comes to TV and film, we can go find our audience. When it comes to theater, the audience has to come to us, which means we have to take into account a general audience and the, for lack of a better term, lowest common denominator. And they pay, especially on Broadway, they pay $200 for a seat. They don't want to be made uncomfortable. If I went out there and sang in a bass voice, I don't want them to see it as like a drag show or a joke.
It's really interesting to see the like contrast compared to how like these comedians who claim they've been like canceled or whatnot, where oh, you pay to see me make you uncomfortable, and that's what we do. But seeing it from a theater standpoint, it seems like it's really about like, hey, these fools are paying like money to go see us. Well, let's make them happy. Is there any way that you think it's possible to get them to compromise on a little bit of like being unsettled, and at the same time like getting your message across? That it's okay to have like
I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is.
That's a valid answer though. I don't know it.
I think about just recently, everything that closed on Broadway were shows that centered minorities. Strange Loop, which had won the Tony, closed like 6 months later. What's the other one? Was it Ain't No More? That left immediately. K-pop, like all these things that centered minority groups. Audiences were like, well, that's not for me. I'm not Black. I'm not Asian. I'm not whatever. That's not for me. And it's wild to me. I think audiences need to be trained to empathize and connect with other stories, because you constantly see this. Like, they were so pissed about what was the one, the Disney, was it called Seeing Red or whatever the hell it was called?
Oh yeah,
Turning Red.
Seeing Red.
Turning Red.
Yeah.
No.
Turning Red. Yeah.
Was that it? Yeah. Because she turned into a red panda.
They were so mad about that one. And it's wild to me, because every other minority group has had to learn to enjoy other people's stories. But for some reason, other people have just never had to. And I don't know how to get them to do that. Like, a friend of mine pointed it out to me. They said, gay men love The Notebook. So why can't straight people love gay stories?
Well, we really see that with like the stuff that happened with The Last of Us just recently, where you had these like super dude bro guys who are like, yeah, I'd be an isolation preppist myself. And then, he turns out to be gay. And they're like, oh my God, I can't relate to this story anymore that I was
Yeah.
obviously relating to right before I found out that he likes men.
Well, everyone else, like every queer person was like,
Oh yeah, I cried like a child during that.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I went through a whole box of fucking napkins, or not napkins, Kleenexes. I was like, it's so beautiful. I was a mess.
yeah, me too.
So my questions are wrapping up, I promise. They're not as complicated as they seem because not much thought goes on up here. However, my next question would be, it's one that I typically like to ask because it really gives me a good judge of a person, is how far are you willing to go to see the future that you want come to its fruition? Because as I said earlier, I'm all about theoretical riots, but yourself, yeah, air quotes. I did that for you, Caroline.
That's for Spotify, not for me. And
Right.
YouTube.
Air quotes.
I am willing to give up as much of my energy, time, person, spoons as possible to make shit happen. I obviously given up a lot of my sanity to be doing what I'm doing on TikTok. I could be, focusing on my career. Instead, I let this take up a lot of my energy. So I'm willing to give up a lot. When it comes, then I don't think, how the fuck do I say this? Violence isn't the option until violence is the option.
Yeah.
Peace was never a negotiation point.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. Peace is not an option.
Yeah. Like no one, like we can't go into things. You have to go into things knowing that as activists and marginalized people, we have to go into knowing that that's a possibility, but we can't go in that with that as the goal in mind.
Right.
For me. But we can't be stupid and then be surprised when it happens.
Yeah, like myself, I never turn the other cheek after I've been struck. I typically break the hand that struck me. As we saw like a week ago. I will break an arm, but it won't be mine. So that's basically all the questions I've got outside of just like typical ones, such as like if your TikTok career takes off even more than it already has, because obviously you're TikTok famous, would you be willing to maybe explore that and use that to create new stories for trans folks, especially?
I think that's part of the goal. That is definitely part of the goal, is to catapult this into something else. And I do want to just go back in 1 second when I say like you have to be prepared for it. That's as a Jew, as someone who has had generation after generation after generation be unalive, driven out. Like you can't be, I keep saying stupid and I shouldn't because it's very ableist, but you cannot be
uninformed,
foolish.
It's foolish and naive to assume that you can go into these places and not expect them to quite possibly fire at you. As a Black person, I saw what happened to Martin Luther King, and I saw what happened to Malcolm X. Doesn't matter your message, you're still going to get shot. And on top of that, being peaceful is definitely going to get you in the history books. Like Martin Luther King is all over the history books, but when it comes to actual like civil rights, he wasn't the only one in that. There was Malcolm X. There was Fred. What's the chairman's name? Fred Hampton, I think it was. There was the BLF. There was the BLA. There were so many groups. Even Samuel Jackson blew up a building. Like, but that's all my questions.
Yeah.
So we've got the hellos and goodbyes next.
No, I have some more questions. Just a few.
I must take a potty break, so I'm gonna mute.
Yeah, like potty break.
What food is your favorite color?
That's a good one.
It does make sense. What food is your favorite
color? So I need a chartreuse food?
Yeah, no, you need a blue food, a red food. Like, do you like to eat red or do you like to eat blue? Maybe some purple?
I think that question is what color is your favorite food?
No. What food is your favorite color?
I think that would be a chartreuse food. Okay.
Ocean, do you have some questions that you would like to end that with us here? And then I have some questions.
I just have one pretty solid question that's more like a plan for the future kind of thing, and that's that in a perfect world, so like complete hypothetical, where would you like to take your very successful platform to? What direction would you like for it to go, and how could you best use it to advocate for the changes you'd like to see?
I mean, I would love it. I think the path I'm currently on, the skills that I have, I would love to turn it into, whether it be my own platform or joining someone else's platform. I would love to be doing something like a Samantha Bee kind of show where it's like news and activism, but comedy and entertainment all at the same time. Where you don't have to have that fake journalistic integrity front. Of course, there should be journalistic integrity, but when they try to play both sides, there isn't both sides in this argument.
Yeah.
One
Or
side
the
wants us not alive. There's no common ground to be met.
Yeah.
So I would
Right.
love to do something like a Samantha Bee or a Daily Show kind of thing.
Do you see yourself ever being like, is it within your desire to maintain like that political lens, or do you see yourself ever moving away from politics?
I don't think it's possible for a trans person. I don't. It would be. I don't think it'll be in my lifetime where it'll be possible for a trans person to be completely devoid of politics, completely unaware of politics. I don't think the world will let us. I, if politics were to fall out of it, let's say Broadway suddenly called, I would still be using what platforms that gave me to be political in the same way that we just saw Laverne Cox have that wonderful interview where she brought up the Institute of Sexology and Magnus Hirschfeld and drew those parallels to history. So even if I ended up in a platform where politics was not it, I would still try outside of that to use my popularity to influence politics.
And okay, one final question then, and that is a message to any trans people who are trying to start their own platform. What advice would you give to young content creators trying to enter a political scene?
Be informed, plan out what you're going to say, watch it many times, look for anything that could be used against you. We have to be so careful. We shouldn't have to be, but we do. We have to be so careful with our words that we don't get things wrong, because for us, you could say 100 correct things. If one thing in the middle of them is wrong, they will throw away the rest of it. Also, just, making sure, not because of the purity tests, to make sure you're not going to alienate another group of trans people in what you're saying, that you're being thoughtful of them. I mean, I recently had this discussion with someone where it was like, how much do we have to stop to hold hands and make people feel seen and validated in every single thing we do? It's a hard line to walk, because there'll be lots of times that I'll say something that, wasn't completely validating of a certain subsect of people. And I'll often stop to hold their hands. And I don't know that we're always going to be able to do that, especially at the point in this fight that we are. That doesn't mean you get left behind. It just doesn't mean you get head pats and a band-aid.
all for me.
No.
I'm sorry, that's a little harsh.
No, beautiful. Athena, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
I kind of got the big one out just as far as like usage of transgenocide, but aside from that, obviously maybe for some other words to help out people who are creating on platforms that might be trying to ban words, other kind of helpful workarounds to make sure that we're targeting the right intensity of feeling and emotion around this, to try and drop the right kinds of sentiment, I guess, because like a lot of people will argue that like trans genocide is only valid in that people are committing suicide without gender affirming care. I don't think that's the case though at all. That
No.
genocide applies to the historical fact of transgender people being historically marginalized, erased, and sometimes eradicated.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
same. It's the same thing as not the same thing. I shouldn't say that, but um, you know, the Black community tried to get um their treatment in the United States. I think it was in the 60s, um, qualified as genocide, and they were like,
So,
well, it's not. You're not. It's like you're not getting dragged away to camps. No, but you're. It literally fits in this definition of creating a one, taking away children, two,
yep.
creating a life where you can't live because of the laws and the discrimination.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was actually in the 70s. That's why one of the reasons when I hear people who are like, "Oh, you shouldn't use such strong language," because then it dips into a realm of legalities. It's like, as a Black person who's studied the liberation of Black folks as best as I could, like it didn't matter what message you're putting out there. There was still uh, they would still basically lie and do whatever they could to arrest these Black leaders. Like we saw
Yeah.
that with Fred Hampton and uh, Martin Luther King. Like there was plenty of government sanctioned, like, oh, we're just gonna put you in jail. Like you stole ice cream. There was no witnesses, no evidence. We gave you 5 to 7 years for ice cream theft. Like
Yeah.
don't expect to play by their rules because they're not going to play by their own rules.
Yes. And I
It's
so it's actually so wild because I am in many ways a rule follower, but when it comes to this, I'm very much not. When it comes to marginalized groups, I'm like, you get what you need, however the fuck you need to get what you need.
Yep.
Um, I had to actually fill out. I went in for my surgery letters to the psychiatrist for the first time yesterday, and I had to fill out this question thing, I guess, to see your mental stability. And there were a number of questions on there that were like, do you think you have to follow the rules at all time? And like a lot of it was like, do you think rich people have to follow the rules, or do you think rich people follow the rules? And then it's like, they should be following the rules. Do I think marginalized people should have to follow the rules? No.
Rich people can afford to follow the rules.
Yes.
Rich people don't even like. I dated this one person who didn't give a shit about the rules. She would be like, "Oh, I'd be like, you can't park here. You're in the red." No, 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 no. That just means I have to park extra. I have to pay extra to park here. A $300 fine? That's nothing. Like, okay,
All
not
right.
dating anymore.
where do you see the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see it going at this rate and at the speed that it's happening?
I mean, the next election is going to be the real teller, right? I mean, I think no matter what, there's going to be people who have to flee red states.
Yeah.
The question is, I just don't know if we could, with how gerrymandered this country is, I don't know that we could ever get to a point where the Equality Act um, is ever going to become a thing, or the Equal Rights Amendment. So I think a lot of people are going to have to leave red states. I don't think there's going to be an option. Fight as long as you can, but if Republicans take the fucking presidency, like, be prepared to fight or flee.
I feel plea before because I feel that they'll put place barriers for us to leave these states. So
I mean,
before they make that.
I've said,
There are barriers in place for us to leave under our own identity for
yeah,
many, many, many people who have
that's
to go
true.
by the state authority for us to get passports under our correct gender in order to get respect and recognition in the countries that we want to leave to. So, yeah. A
Marla,
lot of
how do you balance your view on the hope of a better future? Is that a struggle that you have?
Yeah, I've never been an optimist, um, but I'm stubborn, and I don't have it in me to just let go and be like, well, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. Um, so I have a tendency to charge forward, um, because I know there's no other option. You know, I'm not doing it out of an optimism. I'm doing it out of a survival. And I think a lot of people don't get that.
What are we going to have to do to ensure that the history doesn't repeat itself, which it seems so similar at this time that it is?
It's very interesting because they will always lose, especially now. Because even if history, they can't, with the internet, you can't completely erase history anymore. It's not possible. I don't think. I don't want to find out. But, you know, of course, like if Twitter had fallen, like that would have been in a digital way, sort of like someone compared it to be like the burning of the library at Alexandria
it
for
just filled with really lame memes.
the worst library of Alexandria possible. But
Like happy memes. I call them memes.
I don't think that um it's I don't think they can do it in the way that they've done it in the past, which means they're going to have to find new tactics, which means we're going to have to be ready for them.
It's always something new
When
in the future.
when we step away from this conversation and go back out there and face the world, what would you like the message to be for the trans community specifically at this time? What would you like to say to the siblings listening?
If you at this point are incapable of living for yourself and for your own happiness, live out of spite. There's no other way to put it. If they're making your life miserable, you just I know a lot of people unfortunately don't make it through it, and they of course are never to be blamed for that. But if you have the ability to continue on out of spite, continue on out of spite.
She doesn't wear makeup. She doesn't shave. She doesn't do all this stuff. And it's like, look, you have a beard. You don't wear makeup. And you dress like a very butch lesbian. Don't be shitting on my trans sister. And I know you're a cis straight chick, so fuck off. But yeah, like to me, I just could never think that way because it doesn't make sense to
Right.
think, oh, this person's not
Welcome
bad.
back, Marla.
What's
Could
that?
I just record one last thing? Say one last thing.
Cool.
Of course.
Would that be possible?
Yes,
Mr.
Would you
please.
want a question? Do you want a question to be asked to
No,
segue
I
into
don't.
it, or do you just want to say
I
it?
don't need a question. No. Because you had asked me earlier if I had built a support network,
Mm.
from TikTok, but that of course left out my partner, who I didn't mention, who
Oh,
has been really, I don't know if I would have ever transitioned without them. I don't know if I ever would have figured out that I was trans without them. I think I would have just lived sad, miserably, numb, without them, and without them being the person to really recognize it in me. Um, they're the first person to introduce me to TikTok. I thought it was silly. And even though they were first to show me and I was like, this is silly, I was the first one to make a video. And they've always been there to watch my stuff and make sure I'm not saying anything wrong. I don't think I would have even a tenth of the social justice consciousness that I would have without them. And yeah, they've just always been there when I needed them and to support me through TikTok and through this attack on our rights. And, you know, when we're talking about what happens if a Republican wins in November 2024, you know, they're the person I turn to and like, we have to have a plan. And even though we just got this place, they have the most to lose, they are also the first to say, yeah, like we might have to make sacrifices and go. So yeah, without my partner Luna, I don't know where I would be right now. I don't know if I'd be alive.
Thank you, Marla, so much. This was a really, really lovely afternoon that I got to spend with you, that we get to spend with you. I'm very grateful.
Live out of spite. This was so joyous.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
it
actually
is.
something I say quite a bit.
Joy as an act of resistance. That's what we're talking about.
Joy
Like,
is
if
an
I live
act
for
of
nothing,
resistance.
I live for fucking spite. Hate
Yeah.
is a fantastic fuel. It burns clean.
I mean, I would be such a hypocrite to be like, go find your joy, because I can't fucking find it.
My joy is knowing that I ruined some TERF's day by my like I wake up and I'm like, ooh,
Oh, that account was banned.
Feels good.
Well, that was absolutely incredible. Lucy, thanks for being here with us today, as always.
Yes, you know, and I'm back. I'm going right back to hell to go torture some more TERFs. So have fun, my little
Thank
mortal.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Athena, as always, thanks for being here.
We're happy to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And Ocean Kane, thanks so much for being here as our guest co-host today.
thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Marla Alpert, it has been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm headed back to my own hell. It's known as TikTok, my notifications.